All right, everybody, what we're going to do, we are going to start with chapter 4. You guys are still there. All right, we are on to chapter 4. It's good to see you guys back. So, we left off Johnny Marinville getting the crap beat out of him. How was that, huh? So, we are we are back to where we are starting. Don't ask, my mind's a little blank. All right, chapter 4, part 1. Yes. Steve Ames was breaking one of the 5 commandments, the last one on the list, as a matter of fact. 5 commandments had been given to him a month ago, not by God, but by Bill Harris. They had been sitting in Jack Appleton's office. Appleton had been Johnny Marinville's editor for the last 10 years. He was present for the handing down of the commandments, but did not participate in this part of the conversation until near the end. Only sat back in his desk chair with his exquisitely manicured fingers spread on the lapels of his suit coat. The great man himself had left 15 minutes before, head up and studly gray hair flying out behind him, saying he had promised to join someone at an art gallery down in Soho. All these commandments are thou shalt nots, and I don't expect you to have any trouble remembering them, Harris had said. He was a tubby little guy, and there probably wasn't much harm in him. But everything he said came out sounding like the decree of a weak king. Are you listening? Listening, Steve had agreed. First, thou shalt not drink with him. He's been on the wagon for a while, 5 years, he claims. But he stopped going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's not a good sign. Also for Johnny, the wagons always had a nightstick surface, even with AA. A few after a hard day on the old Harley, you say no. If he starts bullying you, telling you it's part of your job, you still say no. Not a problem, Steve had said. Harris ignored this. He had his speech, and he intended to stick to it. Second, thou shalt not score drugs for him, not so much as a single joint. Third, thou shalt not score women for him, and he's apt to ask you, particularly if some good-looking babes show up at the receptions I'm setting up for him along the way. As with the booze and the drugs, he scores on his own, that's one thing, but don't help him. Steve had thought of telling Harris that he wasn't a pimp, but Harris must have confused him with his own father, and decided that would be fairly imprudent. He opted for silence instead. Fourth, thou shalt not cover up for him. If he starts boozing or drugging, particularly if you have reason to think he's doing coke again, get in touch with me at once. Do you understand? At once. I understand, he replied. And he had, but that didn't mean he would necessarily comply. He had decided he wanted this gig in spite of the problems it presented, in part because of the problems it presented. Life without problems was a fairly uninteresting proposition. But that didn't mean he was going to sell his soul to keep it, especially not to a suit with a big gut and a voice of an overgrown kid who has spent too much of his adult life trying to get some paycheck for real or imagined slights he had suffered in the elementary school playground. And although Johnny Marinville was a bit of an asshole, Steve didn't hold that against him. Harris, though, Harris was in a whole other league. Appleton had leaned forward at this point, making his lone contribution to the discussion before Marinville's agent could get in the final commandment. "What's your impression of Johnny?" he asked Steve. "He's 56 years old, you know, and he's put on a lot of huge mileage on the original equipment, especially in the 80s. He wound up in the emergency room 3 different times, twice in Connecticut and once down here. First 2 were drug ODs. I'm not telling tales out of school, because all that's been reported exhaustively in the press. The last one may have been a suicidal attempt, and that is a tale out of school. I'd ask you to keep it to yourself." Steve had nodded. "So what do you think?" Appleton asked. "Can he really drive almost a half a ton of motorcycle cross-country from Connecticut to California and do 20 or so readings and receptions along the way? I want you to know, I want to know what you think, Mr. Ames, because I'm frankly doubtful." He had expected Harris to come bursting in then, touting the legendary strength and iron balls of his client. Steve knew suits. He knew agents. And Harris was both. But Harris was silent, just looking at him. Maybe he wasn't so stupid after all, Steve thought. Maybe he even cared a little for his particular client. For this particular client. "You guys know him a lot better than I do," he said. "Hell, I only met him for the first time 2 weeks ago, and I've never read one of his books." Harris's face said that last didn't surprise him at all. "Precisely why I'm asking you," Appleton replied. "We have known him for a long time. Me, since 1985, when he used to party with the beautiful people in 54. Bill, since 65. He's a literary world's Jerry Garcia." "Well, that's unfair," Harris said stiffly. "Ugh. I will never be able to read without some kind of mess up, just so y'all know." Appleton shrugged. "New eyes see clear," my grandmother used to say. "So it's me, Mr. Ames. Do you think he can do it?" Steve had seen the question more serious, maybe even vital, and thought it over for almost a full minute. The 2 other men sat and let him. "Well," he had said at last, "I don't know if he can just eat the cheese and stay away from the wine at the receptions, but make it across to California on the bike? Yeah, probably. He looks fairly strong. A lot better than Johnny Garcia did near the end. I'll tell you that. I've worked with a lot of rockers half his age who don't look as good." Appleton had looked dubious. Mostly, though, it's a look he gets on his face. He wants to do this. He wants to get out on the road, kick some ass, take down some names, and Steve had found himself thinking of his favorite movie, one he watched on tape every year or so, Hombre, with Paul Newman and Richard Boone. He had smiled a little, and he looks like a man who's still got a lot of hard bark left on him. I'm glad y'all don't hold it against me. Appleton had looked Appleton had looked downright mystified at that. Steve hadn't been much surprised. If Appleton had ever come equipped with hard bark, Steve thought it would probably all rubbed off by the time he was a sophomore at Exeter or Choate or wherever he'd gone to wear his blazers and rep ties. Harris had cleared his throat. "If we've got that out of the way, the final commandment," Appleton groaned. Harris went on looking at Steve, pretending not to hear. "The 5th and final commandment," he had repeated. "Thou shalt not pick up hitchhikers in thy truck. Neither male nor female thou shalt pick them up, especially not female." Which was probably why Steve Ames never hesitated when he saw a girl standing beside the road just outside Eli. Skinny girl with her nose bent and her hair dyed two different colors. He just pulled over and stopped. Part 2. She opened the door, but didn't get into the cab at first. Just looked at him from across the map-littered seat with wide blue eyes. "Are you a nice person?" he asked. Steve thought this over, then nodded. "Yeah, I guess so," he said. "I like a cigar or two, 3 times a day, but I never kicked a dog that wasn't bigger than me. And I send money home to my mama once every 6 weeks. You're not going to try to slap the make on me or anything?" "Nope," Steve said, amused. He liked the way her wide blue eyes remained fixed on his face. She looked like a little kid studying the funny pages. "I'm fairly well under control in that regard." "And you're not like a crazy serial killer or anything?" "No, but Jesus Christ, do you think I'd tell you if I was?" He's got a good point there. "I'd probably see it in your eyes," the skinny girl with the two-tone hair told him. And although she sounded grave enough, she she was a smiling a little. "I got a psychic streak. It ain't wide, but it's there, buddy. Really, really there." A refrigerator truck roared past, the guy laying on his horn all the way by, even though Steve had squeezed over until the stubby rider was mostly on the shoulder, and the road itself was empty in both directions. No big surprise about that, though. In Steve's experience, some guys simply couldn't keep their hands off their horns or their dicks. They were always honking one or the other. Wow. Enough with the questionnaire, lady. Do you want to ride or not? I've got to roll my wheels. In truth, he was a lot closer to the boss than the boss would maybe approve of. Manville liked the idea of being on his own in America. Mr. Freebird, have pen with travel, and Steve thought that was just how he'd write his book. That was fine too. Great. Totally cool. But he, Steve Andrew Ames, of Lubbock, also had a job to do. His was to make sure Marinville didn't have to write a book on a Ouija board instead of his word processor. His view on how to accomplish that end was simplicity itself. Stay close and let no situation get out of hand unless it absolutely couldn't be helped. He was 70 miles back instead of 150, but what the boss didn't know wouldn't hurt him. "You'll do, I guess," she said, hopped up into the cab and slammed the door shut. "Well, thank you, Cookie," said. "I'm touched by your trust." He checked the rearview mirror, saw nothing but the ass end of Eli, and got back out onto the road again. "Don't call me that," she said. "It's sexist." "Cookie is sexist? Oh, please." In a prim little no-nonsense voice, she said, "Don't call me Cookie, and I won't call you Cake." He burst out laughing. She probably wouldn't like it, but he couldn't help it. That was the way laughing was. Sort of like a fart. Sort of like farting. Sometimes you could hold it in, but a lot of times you couldn't. He glanced at her and saw that she was laughing a little too, and slipping her backpack off. So maybe that was all right. He put her he put her at about 5'6", skinny as a rail, 100 pounds max, and probably more like 95. She was wearing a tank top with torn-off sleeves. It gave an awfully generous view of her breasts for a girl worried about meeting Ted Bundy in a rider van. Not that she had a lot to worry about up there. Steve guessed she could still shop in the training bra section at Walmart if she wanted to. On the front of the shirt, a black guy with dreadlocks grinned from the middle of a blue-green psychedelic sunburst. Bent around his head like a halo were the words, Not gonna give it up. You must like Peter Tosh, she said. It can't be my tits. I worked with Peter Tosh once, he replied. No way! Way, he said. He glanced in the rear view and saw that Eli was already gone. It was spooky how fast that happened out here. He supposed that if he were a young female hitchhiker, he might ask a question or two himself before hopping willy-nilly into someone's car or truck. It might not help, but it sure couldn't hurt, because once you were out in the desert, anything could happen to you. When did you work with Peter Tosh? In 1980 or 81, he said. I can't remember which. Madison Square Garden, then in Forest Hills. Dylan played the encore with him at Forest Hills, blowing in the wind, if you can believe that. She was looking at him with frank amusement, unmixed, so far as he could tell, with doubt. Whoa, cool. What are you, a roadie? Then, yeah, later on I was a guitar tech and now I'm. Yes, that was a good start. But just that was he now. What was he now? Not a guitar tech. That was for sure. Sort of a demoted roadie again. Also part-time shrink. Also sort of like Mary Poppins, only with long brown hippie hair that was starting to show some gray along the center part. Now I'm into something else. What's your name? Cynthia Smith, she said, and held out a hand. He shook it. Her hand was long, feather-like inside of his, and incredibly fine-boned. It was a little like shaking hands with a bird. I'm Steve Ames. From Texas? Yeah, Lubbock. Guess you heard the accent before, huh? Once or twice. Her Gaiman grin lit up her whole face. You can take the boy out of Texas, but he joined her for the rest of it, and they grinned at each other, already friends. The way people can become friends for a little while when they happen to meet on American back roads that go through the lonely places. Go. Part 3. Sit up a little bit better here. There we go. Cynthia Smith was clearly a flake, but Steve was a veteran flake himself. You couldn't spend most of your adult life in the music business without succumbing to flakedom, and it didn't bother him. She told him she had every reason to be careful of guys. One had nearly torn off her left ear, and another had broken her nose not so long ago. And the one who did the ear was a guy I liked, she added. I'm sensitive about the ear. The nose, I think the nose has character, but I'm sensitive about the ear. God knows why. He glanced across at her ear. Well, it's a little flat on top, I guess, but so what? If you're really sensitive about it, you could grow your hair out and cover it up. Not happening, she said firmly, and fluffed her hair, leaning briefly to the right so she could get a look at herself in the mirror mounted on her side of the cab. The half of Steve's side was green, the other half was orange. My friend Gert says I look like little orphan Annie from hell. That's too cool to change. Not gonna give up them curls, huh? She smiled, patted the front of her shirt, and lapsed into a passable Jamaican imitation. I go my own way, just like Peter, mon. Cynthia Smith's way had been to leave home and her parents more or less excuse me, constant disapproval at the age of 17. She had spent a little time on the East Coast. I left when I realized I was getting to be a mercy fuck, he said matter-of-factly, and then had drifted back as far as the Midwest, where she had gotten sort of clean, met a good-looking guy at an AA meeting, a good-looking guy that claimed to be entirely clean. But he had lied. Oh boy, had he lied. Cynthia had moved in with him just the same, a mistake. Had never been what you'd call bright about men, she told Steve in the same matter-of-fact voice. The good-looking guy had come home one night, fucked up on crystal meth, and had apparently decided he wanted Cynthia's left ear as a bookmark. She had gone to the shelter, gotten a little more than sort of clean, even worked as a counselor for a while, after a woman in charge had been murdered, and it looked as if the place might close. The guy who murdered Anna is the same guy who broke my nose, she said. He was bad. Richie, the guy who wanted my ear for the bookmark, he only had a bad temper. Norman was bad, as in crazy. They catch him? Cynthia solemnly shook her head. Anyway, we couldn't let DNS go under just because one guy went crazy when his wife left him. So we pitched in to save it. We did, too. DNS stands for Daughters and Sisters. I've got a lot of my I got a lot of my confidence back while I was there. She was looking out the window at the passing desert and rubbing the ball of her thumb pensively along the bent bridge of her nose. In a way, even the guy who did this helped me with that. Norman? Yep, Norman Daniels. That was his name. At least me and Gert, she's my pal, the one who says I look like little orphan Andy. Annie stood up to him, you know. Uh-huh. So last month I finally wrote home to my folks. I put my return address on the letter, too. I thought when they wrote back, if they ever did, they'd be righteously pissed. My dad especially. He used to be a minister. He's retired now, but you can take the boy out of the hellfire, but you can't take the hellfire out of the boy, Steve said. He smiled. Well, that's sort of what I expected, but the letter I got back was pretty great. I called them. We talked. My dad cried. She said this with a touch of wonder. I mean, he cried. Can you believe that? Hey, I toured for 8 months with Black Sabbath, Steve said. I can believe anything. So you're going home, huh? Yeah, I'm still getting over being sick. So if I have a cough, I just use my elbow, my shirt. So that's why my voice is still like kind of out because I'm still getting over being sick. Doc said it could probably be another week, but I'm hoping not. I'm hoping over the next few days I'll get better. So, but yeah, I'm okay. Return of the prodigal cookie. She gave him a look. He gave her a grin. Sorry. Yeah, sure you are. Anyway, that's close. Where's home? Bakersfield. Which reminds me, how far are you going? San Francisco, but she grinned. Are you kidding? That's so cool. But I can't promise to take you that far. In fact, I can't absolutely promise to take you any further than Austin. The one in Nevada, you know, not the one in Texas. I know where Austin is. I got a map, she said. And now she is giving him a stupid big brother look that he liked even better than her wide-eyed Miss Prim gaze. She was a cutie, all right, and wouldn't she just love it if he told her that? I'll take you as far as I can, but this gig is a little weird. I mean, all gigs are kind of weird. Show business is weird by nature, and this is showbiz. I guess, anyway, but, I mean, he stopped. What did he mean exactly? His span of employment as a writer's roadie, an ill-fitting title. You didn't have to be a writer yourself to know that. But the only one he could think of was almost over, and he still didn't know what to think of it, or of Johnny Marinville himself. All he knew for sure was that the great man hadn't asked Steve to score him any dope or women, and that he'd never answered Steve's knock on his hotel room door with whiskey on his breath. For now, that was enough. He couldn't think about how he was going to describe it on his resume letter. What is the gig? She asked, struck. Are you folky this time? Gordon Lightfoot, something like that? Steve grinned. My guy is sort of a folky, I guess. Only he plays his mouth instead of a guitar or a harmonica. That was when the cellular phone on the dashboard gave out its strident, oddly nasal cry. Oomph, oomph. Steve grabbed it off the dashboard, but didn't open it right away. He looked at the girl instead. Don't say a word, he told her as the phone humped again in his hand a third time. You might get me in trouble if you do, okay? Humph, humph. She nodded. Steve flipped the phone's mouthpiece open and then pushed send on the keyboard, which was how you accepted an incoming call. The first thing he was aware of when he put the phone to his ear was how heavy the static was. He was amazed the call had gone through at all. Hello, that you, boss? There was a deeper, smoother roar behind the static and the sound of a truck going by, Steve thought, and the Marinville's voice. Steve could hear panic even though through the static, and it kicked his heart into higher gear. Oh, so maybe the guy in the jail isn't him. I thought maybe it was. He had heard people talking in that tone before. It happened at least once on every rock tour, it seemed, and he recognized it at once. At Johnny Marinville's end of the line, shit of some variety had hit the fan. Steve, I'm bad. He stared out at the road, running straight arrow into the desert, and felt little seeds of sweat starting to form on his brow. He thought of the boss's tubby little agent with his thou shalt nots and his bullying voice that swept all that way. The last person he needed cluttering up his head right now was Bill Harris. Were you in an accident? Is that it? What's up, boss? Say again. Crackle, zit, crackle. Johnny, hear me? Yes, I hear you. Shouting into the phone now, knowing it was totally useless, but doing it anyway. Aware out of the corner of his eye that the girl was looking at him with mounting concern. What's happening to you? No answer for so long he was positive this time he had lost Marinville. He was taking the phone away from his ear when the boss's voice came through again, impossibly far off, like a voice coming in from another galaxy. East, Eli, Iffy. No, not Iffy, Steve thought. Not Iffy, but 50. I'm west of Eli on Highway 50, maybe anyway. Maybe that's what he's saying. Accident. Got to be. He drove his scoot off the road, and he was sitting out there with a busted leg, blood maybe pouring down his face, and when I get to New York, his guys are gonna crucify me, if for no other reason than that they can't crucify him. Not sure how far, least, probably more. RV pulled off the road. It'll further up. The heaviest blast of static yet. Then something about cops. State cops, town cops. What's? The girl in the passenger seat began. Shh, not now. From the phone. My bike. Into the desert. Wind. Mile or so east of the RV. And that was all. Steve yelled Johnny's name into the phone half dozen times, but only silence came back. The connection had been broken. He used the name menu button to bring up JM on the display window and push send. A recorded voice welcomed him to the Western Roaming Network. There was a pause, and then another recording told him that his call could not be completed at this time. The voice began to list all the reasons why this might be so. He pushed end and flipped the phone closed. God damn it! It's bad, isn't it? Cynthia asked. Her eyes were very wide again, but there was nothing cute about them now. I can see it in your face. Maybe, he said, then shook his head, impatient with himself. Probably. That was my boss. He's up the line somewhere. 70 miles would be my best guess. But it might be as much as 100. He's riding a Harley. Big red cream bike? She asked, suddenly excited. Does he have long gray hair, sort of like Jerry Garcia's? He nodded. I saw him this morning. Way far east of here. she said. He filled up on his little gas at this little gas station cafeteria place in Pretty Nice. You know the town, Pretty Nice? He nodded. I was eating breakfast and saw him out the window. I thought he looked familiar, like I'd seen him on Oprah or maybe Ricky Lake. He's a writer. Steve looked at the speedometer now, saw he had the panel truck up to 70 and decided he could let it out just a little more. The needle crept up toward 75. Outside the windows, the desert ran backward a little faster. He's crossing the country getting material for a book. He's done some speaking too, but mostly he just goes places, talks to people, and makes notes. Anyway, he's had an accident. At least I think that's what happened. The connection was fucked, wasn't it? Uh-huh. Do you want to pull over? Let me out? Because it's no problem if that's what you want. He thought it over carefully. Now that the initial shock was receding, his mind seemed to be ticking away coldly and precisely, as it always had before in situations like this. No, he decided. He didn't want her out, not at all. He had the situation on his hands, one that had to be dealt with right away, but that didn't mean the future could be forgotten. Appleton might be okay, even if Johnny Marinville had high-sided his Harley and fucked himself up big time. He had looked like the sort of man who could, lasers and rep ties notwithstanding, accept the idea that sometimes things went wrong. Bill Harris, however, had struck Steve as a man who believed in playing pin the blame on the donkey when things went wrong, and jamming that pin as far up the donkey's ass as it would go. As the potential donkey, Steve decided what he would really like was a witness, one who had never set eyes on him before today. No, I'd like you to ride along, but I have to be straight with you. I don't know what we're going to find. There could be blood. I can deal with blood, she said. Part 4. She made no comment about how fast he was going, but when the rental truck hit her shoulder harness, both hands curled around the wheel, though. The wind was kicking up, and these speeds, a good hard gust, could swerve you onto the shoulder. Then, if your tires sank in, you were in real trouble. Flipping over trouble. The boss would have been even more vulnerable to wind shear on his bike, he reflected. Maybe that was what had happened. By now, he had told Cynthia the basic facts of his employ. He made reservations, checked routes, vetted sound systems at the places where the boss was scheduled to speak, stayed out of the way so as not to conflict with the picture the boss was painting. Johnny Marinville, the thinking man's lone wolf, a politically correct Sam Peckinpah. Peckinpah hero. The hell is Peck? A writer who hadn't forgotten how to hang tough and lay cool. The panel trunk. Mm-hmm. The panel truck, Steve told her, was empty except for some extra gear and a long wooden ramp, which Johnny would ride up if the weather got too foul to cycle in. Since this was midsummer, that wasn't very likely, but there was another reason for the ramp as well, and for the tie-downs Steve had installed on the floor of the van before setting out. This one was unspoken by either of them, but both had known it was there for the day they had set out from Westport, Connecticut. Johnny Marinville might wake up one morning and simply find himself unwilling to keep riding the Harley, or incapable of it. I've heard of him, Cynthia said, but I've never read anything by him. I like Dean Koontz and Danielle Steele mostly. I think I just read for pleasure. Nice bike, though. And the guy had great hair, rock and roll hair, you know. Steve nodded. He knew. Marinville did too. You really worried about him or just worried what might happen to you? He likely would have resented the question if someone else had asked it, but he sensed no implied criticism in Cynthia's tone, only curiosity. I'm worried about both, he said. She nodded. How far have we come? He glanced down at the odometer. 45 miles since I lost him off the phone. But you don't know exactly where he's calling from? No. You think he just fucked himself up or somebody else too? He looked over at her surprised. The boss must have fucked someone up, was exactly what he was afraid of. But he never would have said so out loud if she hadn't raised the possibility first. Someone else might be involved, he replied reluctantly. He said something about state cops and town cops. It must have been, don't call the state cops, call the town cops. I couldn't tell for sure. She pointed to his cellular, which was back on the dashboard. No way, he said. I'm not calling any cops until I see what kind of mess he's gotten himself into. And I promise that I won't be in my that won't be in my statement if you promise not to call me Cookie anymore. He smiled a little, although she didn't feel much like smiling. Probably that's a good idea. You could always say that your phone wouldn't work anymore. She finished. Everybody knows how finicky these things are. You're okay, Cynthia. You're not so bad yourself. At just under 90, the miles melted away like spring snowfall. Well, that's going to drive me nuts. Huh. Piece of paper there that's going to drive me nuts. Ooh. Okay, let's not. Spring snowfall. When they were 60 miles west of the point where Steve had lost connection, he began to slow the truck a couple of miles an hour for each mile traveled. No police cars had passed them in either direction, and he supposed that was good. He said so, and Cynthia shook her head doubtfully. It's weird, is what it is. If there's been an accident where your boss or maybe someone else got hurt, wouldn't you think a few cop cars would have gone past us by now? Or an ambulance? Well, if they come from the other way, west, according to my map, the next town that way is Austin, and that's much further ahead of us than Eli is behind us. Anything official, anything with sirens is what I mean. Should be heading east to west, catching up with us. Get it? I guess so, yeah. So where are they? I don't know. Me either. Well, keep looking for, well, shit, who knows? Anything out of the ordinary. I am. Slow down a bit more. He glanced at his watch and saw it was 5:45. The shadows had drawn long across the desert, but the day was still bright and hot. If Marinville was out there, they would see him. You bet we will, he thought. He's going to be sitting at the edge of the road, probably with his head busted and half his pants torn off from when he spilled and rolled, and likely making notes on how it felt. Thank God he wears his helmet at least. If he didn't, I see something up there. The girl's voice was excited but controlled. She was shading her eyes from the westering sun with her left hand and pointing with her right. See? Could that? Shit, no. That's way too big to be a motorcycle. Looks like a motorhome. I think this is where he called from, though. Somewhere around here, anyway. What makes you think so? He said there was an RV off the road a little further up. I heard that part quite clearly. He said he was about a mile east of it, and that's about where we are now, so. Excuse me. Yeah, don't say it. I'm looking. He slowed the Ryder truck to 30, then, as they approached the RV, the walking space, Cynthia had unrolled the passenger window and was halfway out of it, her tank top riding up to reveal the small of her back. The small of her back, Steve thought, and the ridge of her spine. Anything, he asked her, at all? Nope. I saw a glint, but it was way out on the desert floor, a lot further than he'd have gone if he'd cracked up. Or if the wind pushed him off the road, you know? Probably the sun reflecting off the mica in the rocks. Uh-huh, could have been. Don't fall out that window, girl. I'm fine, said. Then winced her eyes, shut as the wind, which was becoming steadily more grumpy, threw grit in her face. If this is the RV he's talking about, we've already passed where he called from. She nodded. Yeah, but keep going. If there's somebody home in there, they might have seen him. They might have saw him. He snorted. Might have saw him. Did you learn that reading Dean Koontz or Danielle Steele? She pulled in long enough to give him a haughty look. But he thought he saw hurt behind it. Sorry, that he said. I was only teasing. Oh, he said coolly. Tell me something, Mr. Big Texas Roadie. Have you read anything your boss has written? Well, he gave me a hard copy of Harper's with a story of his in it. Heaven Sent Weather, it was called. I read it. Sure did. Every word. Did you understand every word? No. Look what I said was Look, what I said was snotty. I do apologize sincerely. Okay, she said, but her tone suggested that he was going to be on probation at least for a while. He opened his mouth to say something that might be funny if he was lucky, something that would give her a smile. He had a nice one. And then he got a really good look at the RV. Oh, hey, what's this? He asked, speaking more to himself than to the girl. What's what? She turned her head and looked out through the windshield as Steve coasted the Ryder truck to a stop on the shoulder, just behind the RV. It was one of the middle-sized ones, bigger than Lassie, but smaller than the Godzillas he'd been seeing ever since Colorado. Guys must have run over some nails in the road or something, Steve said. Tires look like they're all flat. Yeah, so how come yours aren't? By the time it occurred to him that the people in the RV might have been public spirited enough to pick up the nails, the girl in the punky two-tone hair was out of the cabin walking up to the RV, hallooing. Hallooing. Well, she's a good exit line when she gets one off. Give her that, he thought, and got out on his side. Wind struck him in the face hard enough to rock him back on his heels, and it was hot, like air blown over the top of an incinerator. Steve, her voice was different. The prickly pertness, which he thought might have been the girl's way of flirting, was gone. Come over here. I don't like this. She was standing by the side door of the RV. It was unlatched, banging back and forth in the wind, a little, even though this was the lee side. I might have to put a cough drop in. There we go. This was the lee side, and the steps were down. It wasn't the door or the steps she was looking at, though. At the foot of the stairs, half buried in sand, that the wind had blown beneath the RV, was a doll with blonde hair. There we go. In a bright blue dress. It lay face down and abandoned. Steve didn't care for the look of this much either. Dolls with no little girls around to mind them were sort of creepy under any conditions. That was his opinion, at least. To come upon one abandoned by the roadside, half buried in blowing sand. He opened the unlatched door and poked his head into the RV. It was brutally hot, at least 110 degrees. Hello? Anybody? But he knew better. If they'd been here, the people who own this RV, they would have been running the engine for the air conditioning. Don't bother, Cynthia had picked up the doll and was brushing sand from its hair, the folds of its dress. This is no dime store dolly. Not huge bucks, but expensive. And somebody cared about her. Look. She pulled out the skirt with her fingers so he could see where the small, neat patch had been sewn over the rip. It matched the dress almost exactly in color. If the girl who owned this doll was around. Yeah, I might have to stop here in a minute. It wouldn't have been out laying in the dirt. I practically guarantee you that. The question is, why didn't she take it with her when she and her folks left? Or at least put it back inside? She opened the door, hesitated, went up one of the two steps, hesitated again, looked back at him. Come on. I can't. I have to find the boss. In a minute, okay? I don't want to go in by myself. It's like the Andrea Doria or something. You mean the Mary Celeste? The Andrea Doria sank. Okay, smarty britches, whatever. Come on. It won't take long. Besides, she hesitated. Besides, it might have something to do with my boss. Is that what you're thinking? Cynthia nodded. It's not that big a reach. I mean, they're both gone, aren't they? He didn't want to accept that, though. It felt like a complication he didn't deserve. She saw some of that on his face. Maybe even all of it. She sure wasn't dumb. And tossed up her hands. Aw, shit. I'll look around myself. She went inside, still holding the doll. Steve looked thoughtfully after her for a moment, then followed. Cynthia glanced back at him, nodded, then put the doll down in one of the captain's chairs. She fanned her tank top at her neck. Hot, she said. I mean, boogery. She walked into the RV's cabin. Steve went the other way, into the driver's area, ducking his head so that he didn't so as not to bump it. On the dashboard in front of the passenger seat were 3 packs of baseball cards, neatly sorted into teams: Cleveland Indians, Cincinnati Reds, Pittsburgh Pirates. He thumbed through them and saw that about half were signed, and maybe half of the signed ones were personalized. Across the bottom of Albert Bell's card was this: To David, keep sluggin', Albert Bell. And another from the Pittsburgh pile: See the ball before you swing, Dave. Your friend, Andy Van Slyke. This was a There was a boy too, Cynthia said. Unless the girl was into G.I. Joe and Judge Dredd and the Moto Cops, as well as dollies in blue dresses. One of the side carriers back here is full of comic books. Yeah, there's a boy, he said, putting Albert Bell and Andy Van Slyke back into the respective piles. He just brought the ones that were really important to him, he thought, smiling a lot. The ones who he absolutely could not bear to leave home. His name is David. Startled. How in the hell do you know that? Learned it while watching Learned it all watching the X-Files. He picked up a gas credit receipt from the wad of papers jammed into the dashboard receptacle and smoothed it out. The name on it was Ralph Carver, the address somewhere in Ohio. The carbon was blurred across the town name, but it might have been Wentworth. I don't suppose you know anything else about him, do you? She asked. Last name, where he came from? David Carter, he said, the smile widening into a grin. Dad's Ralph Carver. They hail from Wentworth, Ohio. Nice town. Next door to Columbus? I was in Columbus with Southside Johnny in '86. She came forward, the doll curled again, one mosquito bump breast against one mosquito bump breast. Outside, the wind gusted again, throwing sand against the RV. It sounded like a hard rain. You're making that up. No, said, and held out the gas receipt. Here's the Carver part. David, I got from the kids' baseball cards. He got some high-priced ink. Tell you that. She picked the cards up, looked at them, and then put them back, and turned slowly all the way around, her face solemn and shiny with sweat. He was sweating himself, and plenty. He could feel it running down his body like a light, sticky oil. Where'd they go? Nearest town to get help? He said. Probably someone gave them a lift. You remember from your map what's around here? No, there's a town, I think, but I don't recall the name. But if that's what they did, why didn't they lock up their place when they left? I mean, all their shit is here. He waved one hand toward the cabin. Know what's back there by the studio couch? Nope. The wife's jewelry caddy, ceramic frog. You put your earrings and earrings in the frog's mouth. That makes sense. My grandma had one. That sounds tasteful. He wanted to get that he wanted to get out of here. And not just because it was so nasty hot or because he had to track down the boss. He wanted to get out because the RV was like the fucking Mary Celeste. It was too easy to imagine vampires hidden away in the closets, vampires in Bermuda shorts and Highway 50, the loneliest highway in America. What? What? What do you want? You just decided you want to come bug me? Is that it? What are you doing? I'm reading. I'm almost done. I'm going to read a little bit more. Okay? Is it okay? Is it okay? Okay. That was Phoebe. It's actually cute, she said. That's not the point. These two sets of earrings and finger ring in it, not real expensive, but not junk either. There's two sets of earrings. The ring's a tourmaline, I think. So why didn't they? She saw something on the map holder, something that had been revealed when he stirred the crammed in papers, and plucked out a dollar-sign money clip that looked like real silver. There were bills folded into it. She fanned them quickly with the tip of her finger, then tossed the money clip back into the map holder as if it was hot. How much? He asked. 40 or so. The clip itself probably worth 3 or 4 times that much. Tell you what, Pilgrim, this smells bad. Another gust of wind splashed sand against the northern side of the RV. This one hard enough to rock it a little on its flat tires. The two of them looked at each other out of their sweat shiny faces. Steve met the doll's blank blue gaze. What happened here, honey? What did you see? He turned for the door. Time for the cops? Cynthia asked. Soon. First, I want to walk a mile of back trail. See if I can spot any sign of my boss. And this one? Man, that's really dumb. He looked at her for a moment, not saying anything, then pushed past her and went down the steps. She caught up with him at the foot of them. Hey, let's call it even, okay? You made fun of my grammar, I made fun of your whatever. Intuition? Intuition is that what you call it? Well, fine, call it even. Say, yeah, please. I'm not spooked to want to piss in the cat box. I'm too spooked to want to piss in the cat box. He smiled at her, a little touched by the anxiety on her face. Okay, yeah, he said, even as even can be. You want me to drive the truck back? I can do a mile by the odometer. Give you a finishing line to shoot for? Can you turn it around without? A semi with Kleenex softens the blow. Written on the side, blasted past at 70, headed east. Cynthia flinched back at it, shielding her eyes from flying sand with one Kate Moss arm. Steve put his own arm around her scant shoulders, steadying her for a moment or two. Without getting stuck, he finished. She gave him an annoyed look and stepped out from under his arm. Of course. Well, 1.5 miles, okay? Just to be on the safe side? Okay. She started toward the Ryder truck, then turned back to him. I just remembered the name of the little town that's close to here, she said, and pointed east. It's up that way, south of the highway. Cute name. You're gonna love it. Lubbock. What? Depression. Or desperation. What? Desperation, she grinned and climbed up into the cab of the truck. Oh, good Lord. Depression. That's the name of the town. Yes, she is. She's very big. Her mama's a Rottie and her dad was a pit bull. He might have had some Saint Bernard, and if he did, he was just the webbed feet. But she got the pit bull look. She's the skinnier. She got the bigger, big head, but she's the skinnier. Whereas her brother is big like a Rottie. He's built. She's like this. He's like this. He's bigger than her. So each of them took over one. They are 6 months apart. Phoebe was born last May, and her brother was born last November. So, hey, you can have her. She's very hyper and she loves to jump. Phoebe, what are you doing? Come here. What are you doing? Come here. Come here. Come here. Up. Up. Hey, hi. You tell everybody hi? Tell everybody hi? Yeah? You're a big girl. Oh, you walk away from her, she gets all mad. She took her walk today, and boy, was she happy. Thank you. Yeah, they both got the white on their chin, the white on their neck, and the white on their chest. It's like twins. They are exact. I'm telling you. It's great. But like I said, she's hyper as hell. She loves to jump. She barks in people's faces. But we're doing good. Today she did excellent on her walk, so. Hi, Mama. How you doing, Harley? Really? I got what? She wants her back itched. You don't like Sharon or what? This happens every time. Mama comes up for pets and she's got to come get pets. Do you guys need outside? Is that what you need? You guys need outside? All right. We will do part 5 later. I usually don't read for more than an hour because then I just start getting like all messed up and like the dogs start wanting attention and then I've got to get up and move around and I don't like sitting for too long in one spot. So I read for about an hour at a time, but I've been working on reading a couple times a day so that I get, oh, she's hyper. Oh my good Lord. She got up, was it this morning? Yesterday morning. And she just ran and ran and ran the whole fence. Like she was like watching a horse just run. I have no idea why. But yeah, she's a goofball. Are you learning how to itch your back? Timber did it yesterday. He was on his back and he's just wiggling back and forth. And Mama did it a little bit ago. Now she's doing it. And we cut their tails long. They don't have any tan on them. But yeah, she's hyper. What are you doing? Here, go outside. Oh, they're adorable. But yeah, she's getting better. Between 18 months and 24 months. So between a year and a half, 2 years is when her hyperness will start going down, we hope. Hi. She actually did really good on her walk today. She didn't bark at the guys that were working on the house too much. I'd get her attention. She'd walk right back with me. So she only barked a little bit. We're doing good. So got a lot of training to do, but we're getting there, huh? All right, you guys ready to go outside? I got to make dinner anyway. All right. I really appreciate you guys being here. I love that you guys spend time with me. Um, follow if you haven't. That way you guys can see when, I'm live. Being sick, it's not easy to make up that schedule. But I like to read in the morning, and then it's nice to be able to read in the afternoon. And sometimes if I am up to it, I read at night. But lately, because I've been sick, I've been going to bed earlier. So I haven't been reading at night. But I definitely do read in the mornings when I'm feeling good. Sunday, I completely missed, I do believe, because I just didn't feel good at all. So, oh, that was yesterday. Maybe I did read yesterday afternoon. I think it was in the afternoon, but the morning I didn't. Anyway, I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for, the compliments on my puppies. They're amazing. The big one, the Harley, she's Dad's dog, my husband's dog, and Phoebe is kind of both of ours. I don't really have a dog. I have a cat. Didn't like the dogs. So, anyway, you guys have a good evening. Have the rest of your evening good. I know. I love that you're always here. It's awesome. It's like being able to spend time together in a reading club. I think it's fun. I do. I love being able to read. And, sometimes I read by myself, but I've been enjoying reading out to people. So it's really fun. I've got a couple more books I want to start reading, but if I read too many books at once, I forget what's going on in them. So I've got this one, and then I think Misery might be next. Me and my son were talking about that, and he mentioned Misery, and he was a very funny um, meme. And so I told him, I said, I need to read Misery. So that might be our next one. Anyway, I will see you guys later. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. Lots of love. Love you guys. Thank you. And I shall talk to you soon. Bye.